Effective reentry begins with sentencing that is based on research, not retribution. Prisons can be a destructive place for low-risk individuals.
We are recommending that reentry preparation begin as soon as an inmate arrives in the facility where they will be held. We believe that a successful reentry should be the goal for every inmate. So we would like to see plans developed in Ohio in cooperation with the inmate's family when possible, and any other significant people in their lives to help them reach a successful reentry. A successful reentry is good for individuals in our prison system. It's good for their families, and obviously it's good for society. It is good for the state as a whole. We found in the course of our research that a primary predictor of recidivism is the presence of poverty in a person's background and current reality, and that incarceration disproportionately affects Black and Brown people because of the correlation with poverty. We're recommending that Ohio create a detailed evaluation of each and every inmate, including their physical and mental health, their substance use status, their potential educational level, which is important, what their financial condition is, including their existing debts, their financial literacy. Are they able to understand and handle money and a bank account and that kind of thing? And any known socioeconomic conditions that might have contributed to the criminal activity. We also think Ohio should provide, as much as possible, a mentoring program to individuals once they are incarcerated, and maybe increasingly as they get close to the end of their sentencing time. It's also worth noting that a fairly high percentage of incarcerated individuals have accumulated trauma from their childhood experiences. These are deep wounds that people come in with, many of them very badly damaged. And these are not wounds that are easily fixed. We are recommending that Ohio be very aware of that with the individuals that they have in prisons, and that appropriate means of help, whether it's therapy, recreational activities, sports, whatever it is that could help them recover from childhood trauma, be started in prison, because it's a long-term issue to restore people to good functional status once they leave the system. There's no one size fits all for any inmate, or certainly for anyone who's recovering from childhood trauma. But we would like to see Ohio develop detailed plans to address all the relevant needs when the inmate is imprisoned.
Reentry Principle 2. League of Women Voters of Ohio supports the state investing sufficient resources in the reentry process as a means of increasing successes and reducing recidivism. Over time, extra funds spent on reentry are predicted to result in the state saving the expenses of further years of incarceration while significantly benefiting individuals' lives. Ohio prisons now provide some services to inmates aimed at facilitating a successful reentry upon release. However, the world to which a returning citizen returns is not the same as the one he left. He will need assistance finding housing, employment, and perhaps further education. If he entered prison with mental health, or addiction problems, the treatment started there must be continued until he's strong enough to stand on his own, or we risk the loss of the entire investment. It is bad policy to support a prisoner in prison and then drop him upon release. Continued state support could mean the difference between a successful reentry and a return to prison. And a return to prison obligates Ohio to $30,000 or more every year he remains there. Bottom line, continuing state support for returning individuals is both humane and supportive of some of Ohio's most vulnerable citizens. It also makes good economic sense.
For Principle 3, the League of Women Voters of Ohio supports developing a database that includes each inmate's characteristics, the reentry support he or she receives, and what is needed to facilitate an effective reentry process. And this is an overlap of our work in the reentry subcommittee with the work of several other subcommittees, so it should be familiar to you. We are not sure exactly what kinds of data the state of Ohio currently collects on inmates. That is something that just was not available to us. And whether there's data that is longitudinal in nature, that follows the individual throughout the course of their imprisonment. But we would like to see the state use different approaches and share best practices among the prison members of the prison staff, possibly share best practices with other states and what they're doing in their prison systems to try to come up with the best methods to assist people to re-enter some kind of state that will enable them to become productive citizens. Certainly tracking successes and failures will be important. And we also would like to see a grant program that would enable universities and other external research entities conduct studies on what is happening with reentry and how prisoners are being assisted, developed, facilitated to have the most positive chances for success. And finally, we would like to have the impact of our interventions on Ohio prisoners measured, look at those, how many are successful, how many are not, and what is the cost to the state of recidivism, and what is the financial impact on the state when released citizens are effective and successful in society. How much money can we save by doing that? Thank you.
The League of Women Voters of Ohio supports establishing more uniformity across regions in the level of support received by returning citizens throughout the state. Reportedly, there are 18 reentry coalitions across the state. While some areas, especially metropolitan areas, are rich in not-for-profit and volunteer-based community services, in others, typically rural locales, released citizens are not so fortunate. Drastic inequities in the form of disparate resources, support, transportation availability, and imposed penalties are levied on reentry citizens based on regional location of reentry. Such disparities create an unequal social justice reality for reentry potential for success and should be addressed. In those counties with lower levels of support, the state should be prepared to step up and provide funding for needed services to ensure the success of our returning citizens.
Our final principle is that the League of Women Voters of Ohio supports policies that reduce the likelihood of a restored citizen's return to prison while on parole. That might seem obvious, and yet what we learned is that there are systems in place that, for sometimes very minor infractions, citizens who have been placed on parole can be returned back to the prison system. Maybe because they failed to check in with the parole officer since they were at work and they couldn't get to the phone, or maybe because of other issues relating to timing, not for infractions that put the community at risk. And so I think we really need to have some common sense thoughts about the ways in which parole violations or parole issues are managed such that citizens can be restored effectively and consistently?
So the Criminal Justice Reform Reentry Committee's outlook is that League members can advocate with their own state and local elected representatives to implement transformational changes in Ohio's criminal reentry practices. They can call upon elected officials to be transparent about the number of Ohioans currently incarcerated, the rates of recidivism associated with our state prisons, and the efforts underway to restore citizens successfully to their communities. League members can also ask their elected representatives to deliver sufficient state and local funding to ensure effective alternatives to incarceration, as well as support for community-based reentry and rehabilitation opportunities that reduce recidivism and create financial savings for the state. Citizens can support reentry employment, housing, and necessary support for returning citizens through existing public and private programs to support returning citizens.
In the end, society must look at individuals in the criminal justice system as human beings deserving a second chance if reentry is to be successful.